League of Legends is a popular multiplayer online battle arena, or also called a MOBA, created by a company called Riot Games. League has one of the largest fan bases in the world with a competitive scene that rivals that of actual sporting events, and League is Riot's first major work and thus led most of their works to be based on League itself. Teamfight Tactics is an auto chess that's based on League champions. Legends of Runeterra is a Magic the Gathering inspired card game based on League. Wild Rift and Ruined King are a mobile League of Legends and a role-playing game respectively, and both are under development currently. League of Legends originated as a Defense of the Ancients 2 or Dota 2 mod, where the original developers for Riot Games created their own heroes for Dota 2, which would eventually become the champions for Summoner's Rift. While League's popularity is immense, the game itself is both unique and infuriating. Allow me to explain. League can be seen in many different ways. Mainly, I'm going to explain it in 3 different sections. They're going to be the mechanics, the gameplay, and the champions themselves. League is fundamentally one of the hardest games a player can learn, and that's somewhat of a negative for me. In previous seasons of the game, the system was pretty simple. You would kill your laner, you would destroy their tower, and you would slay their dragon for a bit of extra gold. But now, all 3 of these core aspects have been changed. Laning is the most consistent of all these changes. There are 3 lanes, top lane, middle lane, and bottom lane, with a jungle in between. Though before, the formation of the champions used to be 2 champions in the top lane, 1 in the middle lane, and 2 in the bottom lane. Now, there's 1 in the top lane, 1 in the middle lane, and 2 in the bottom lane, and 1 constantly traversing the jungle and killing all the monsters that would dwell within. Before, all the players had to congregate to slay 1 single dragon that would grant them all 150 bonus gold. But now, there are different types of dragons, all giving different buffs that are amplified once claiming the soul of the dragon by slaying it up to 4 times, and a special dragon that appears after claiming the soul that grants an instant execute when an enemy drops below its certain threshold of health. All of this is done through the jungler, who has a spell that does an instantaneous instant damage onto these larger NPC objectives, and I know this sounds extremely simple. But you're probably thinking, but Evan, this doesn't sound so complicated, I'm pretty sure you're just bad. Well, listen here, if I was bad, I wouldn't have reached the venerated rank of Bronze 1. Now let me continue. Before, turrets used to fire a laser that would do consistent damage, and they would have a set number of resistances and health that granted 600 gold upon destruction. But now, turrets have a low base resistance that increases for every turret plate that's taken. However, each turret plate grants 160 gold with 5 plates and grants 150 bonus gold upon destroying the tower. Not to mention you get 150 bonus gold if you destroy the first tower. And that's not enough. The tower not only gains resistances for every plate that's broken, but for the number of champions present while destroying the tower. And now the tower also fires bolts instead of continuous damage, and each consecutive bolt deals an increasing amount of damage for each bolt fired. And while I couldn't explain in depth on how these minions, the little red and blue things that inhabit the lane, grant different gold amounts depending on the time, location, and how each of them have their own unique resistances and scale with them as the game continues, I feel that my point has been made with these insane mechanics. Overall, the changes that Riot implements really rewards veteran players for adapting to the statistic changes while also punishing new players who have trouble even understanding what their champion's passive does. A combination of these factors with the game's mechanics makes Mount Everest look like an anthill in comparison to League's steep learning curve. While on the topic, the gameplay itself is entertaining but inherently pretty toxic, and there's no really other way to describe that. Let me put it like this. When a champion dies, they're put onto a death timer, and this timer can be anywhere from 7 seconds to a minute and a half, depending on the level of the champion. And this doesn't sound so bad, but in a game of League where every fraction of a second adds up and matters, 10 seconds wasted can cost an entire game. Imagine you're playing Mario, but every time you die, someone comes into your room, takes the controller from you, and makes you wait a minute and a half before giving it back and saying, okay, now try again, but this time with one hand. This is because when a champion dies in laning phase, this is a huge advantage for their opponent. If the champion dies somewhere else, the laner gets free farm, which is just extra gold for them, and maybe even tower plates. If the laner kills their opponent, that's free farm again with the tower plates, but this time they get 300 extra gold for killing them. This leads to a mechanic that players like to call snowballing, where a champion gets 1 kill and gold earned from that kill creates an item advantage, where they can potentially get more kills and more gold and more item advantages. Next thing you know, in 10 minutes you have a 6 item, 37 and 1 Master Yi killing the entire enemy team inside their fountain. When a champion snowballs, it's infuriating to play against because you just keep dying and dying with absolutely no change. This is all because the advantage and disadvantages you create in League are exponential. Even if you start snowballing, your teammates can do so horribly that their lane champion snowballs out of control and you can't even do anything about it. Even playing with a snowball can be infuriating. Let's go back to the Master Yi example, because Master Yi is killing everyone in their own spawn. This means that his teammates can't play the game because he's effectively playing it for them. Which obviously isn't fun for anyone on the enemy team except for Master Yi, except Master Yi is probably not very fun because he's just pressing Q and right click. The most rewarding aspect of League is probably when you can punish a snowballing enemy when they make a mistake and getting the shutdown gold that they accumulate from doing too well. This gold can go up to 1,000 gold and can really easily put champions back in the game. And speaking of champions, my favorite point, really easily the best aspect of League. Each champion has their own unique backstories, skins, abilities, playstyles, and even their own music. I mean, like, listen, I've been putting music in the background, and it's been in the top left. You can check it out if you want. But just listen to this. some of these champions are given godlike status that Riot tries to market themselves towards popular trends. I'm looking at you, KDA. God. KDA is a K-pop group formed by Riot themselves, composed of the more attractive female characters in League. They are Ari, Kaisa, Evelyn, Akali, and Garbage. The champions all have their own niche roles, and the most basic of which you can define as supports, mages, assassins, bruisers, tanks, attack damage carries, and ability power carries, also called ADCs and APCs respectively. While most bruisers, tanks, and ADCs are relatively balanced or in some cases too weak, I'm sorry Twitch, the most annoying class of champions are definitely the mages and assassins, and what better way to explain how they're annoying than using a combination of both, specifically Kassadin, the mage assassin. Personally, I love Kassadin, and I hate Kassadin. I love him because I get to one-shot any squishy character. On the other hand, I hate him because he can one-shot any squishy character. Allow me to explain. To explain properly, explaining his kit. But his kit is going to be a little more complicated for someone who doesn't play League, so I'm going to be using the example from the YouTuber Skooch's explanation of Kassadin from his video, Can We Talk About This, Kassadin? I'll be putting a link to that in the description below. Kassadin's passive ability is to receive a flat 15% magic damage reduction, which means that at mage level 1 versus a Kassadin, you're like fighting a naked man, but he has a shield. Because essentially, 15% of what you do just does not happen. His Q ability is called Null Sphere. It shoots an orb of void energy to deal a scaling amount of damage while also creating a shield that absorbs magic damage. So going back to the naked man with a shield analogy, now he uses 2. But this one has a gun on it. His second ability is called Netherblade, and allows him to reset his auto attack while empowering it slightly with extra magic damage, while also passively increasing his other basic attacks with more bonus damage. And this ability replenishes 4% of Kassadin's missing mana on hit, but is quintupled when it's used against an enemy champion. His E is an ability called Force Pulse, which is a cone-shaped blast that deals a lot of damage while slowing enemies for up to 90%, effectively rooting them in place. However, this ability can only be cast after 6 abilities have been casted on Kassadin, which really isn't even a balance, considering that since Kassadin is one of the few teamfight assassins, 6 abilities are going to go by faster than the cooldown of the ability, so he pretty much always have E up. And finally, his ultimate ability is the bread and butter of his damage. It's what he's known for. It's called Rift Walk. It's a blink, which is an instantaneous dash that deals damage and area effect that increases in both power and mana cost after every use. At maximum rank, this ability is on a 1.5 second cooldown, meaning that Kassadin can literally deal damage while flying away or towards his enemies, while also one-shotting anyone he wants. His abilities don't sound so lucrative until you consider the scaling. A standard Kassadin build grants the champion around 4,000 mana and 900 ability power and 30 to 40% cooldown reduction. And Kassadin's Netherblade does about 140 base damage plus 70% of his total ability power. This alone could probably kill any squishy target in one hit, but that's not all. Kassadin normally purchases an item called Lichbane, which grants his auto attack after casting ability 150% of his current attack damage and plus 40% of his scaling from his AP. And to ensure that he really overkills his enemies, his ultimate Riftwalk, as previously mentioned, deals more damage with each use, the exact scaling which totals to about 360 base damage plus 70% of his AP and 6% of his maximum mana, meaning that a full build Kassadin with one full combo will deal 5,273 damage in 2 seconds. But to put this into perspective, the average health of a major ADC is around 1,600. Champions like Kassadin are the exact reason why League is such a frustrating game to play, because once he gets 2 items, Kassadin becomes an almost unkillable monster that dominates the enemy team. There's so many champions like Kassadin in a toxic arena full of meta champions that are way too strong for anyone to beat head to head and often lead to maybe 3-4 versus 1 situations where a single champion can always almost come out on top. And in some cases, champions are made to do this, and some of them are really good at it, like really, really good at it. For me, that's one of the main points that I hate about the gameplay, is because there's just so many champions that are made to 4v1 and you can't do anything about it. But there's always just that voice in the back of your head that just tells you to keep pushing on, and that just makes the player continue to stumble around until hopefully something finally goes in their favor. Overall, I really enjoy League as an experience because it feels so rewarding to dominate and crush your opponents or even escape from a bad situation by completely outsmarting them. However, it feels so awful to lose, even more than other games, because the game punishes you for losing. And this effectively is something that's hard to recommend to a new player, purely because the game itself is too hard to learn without a friend constantly answering questions on what a champion does, or what items do, how champions and items synergize with each other, or why Riot Games created a social media black hole known as Seraphine that capitalized on creating a fake persona that has depression even though it was just marketing its $20 skin. Personally, I love League, and I also hate League. And that's just how a majority of the players feel. League has a special love to hate, hate to love relationship with its players. That's just so hard to find in any other game. And that's just what makes it so special and lovable to me.